Well, hello, North Country and all the ships at sea. Gordy Little and Calvin Castine and Hometown Cable in our little corner all together again at a place that should be familiar to every one of you watching unless you're a neophyte or haven't been around this area for a very long time. You are now looking at the oldest extant building on Plattburgh, the former Plattburgh Air Force Base. I don't know if those of you who are familiar with Plattburgh even know that this is one of the oldest active military installations in the United States until the Plattburgh Air Force Base was forced to close in 1997. This building in particular is near and dear to my heart. If you've driven up and down Route 9, I don't mean Halloween because it's always fun around Halloween, but any night to see the spotlight on this building and just view the majesty of it, then perhaps you get a feeling of the history. The Haunted Haunts bus tours was a familiar sight for me for a long time several years ago as we took tours around the area on behalf of the Battle of Plattsburgh Association. And Teddy Roosevelt himself, reincarnated just for the occasion, stood right up there on that porch and gave a stirring speech for all the people on the bus. It is an old building. It dates to the late 1838 as far as I knew, although I saw a lot of different kinds of information circulating in various press organizations today. But the reason we're standing here doing another TV show, and Calvin and I have done many here as well, is because there will be a news conference scheduled for 5 o'clock today, which will be about 36 minutes from now, in the Stafford building at Clinton Community College on the Bluff. There will be a lot of VIPs present, and announcements will be made. We have watched this building. Well, I've watched it for 53 years when I came to Plattburgh in 1961, interested in what was going to happen here. I've seen a museum in here. I've seen various other things in here, but did you know that it was a barracks when it was constructed? It was a hospital at one time or another. There were offices inside this building. And so many things have happened since 1838, 1839, 1840, 1841. On the internet, of course, you know I love ghost stories, so there are lots of ghost stories about this place that say it was an important factor in the Revolutionary War. Well, I just mentioned the date 1838, so you know it wasn't here during the Revolutionary War. But it is a wonderful place, and just before we go to the news conference, Calvin and I thought it would be a great idea for you to get a look at it in all its majesty. Sadly, it's falling apart. It needs help. Various organizations and various individuals in high and low places have worked very hard over the last few years to see that this building gets preserved. We thought it was out of our grasp, but alas, there will be an announcement tonight to the contrary. May I read this announcement before we go to the news conference? It's entitled, Important Announcement Planned for Plattburgh's Old Stone Barracks. Tuesday, August 5th, that's today. The Friends of the Old Stone Barracks will make an important announcement regarding the preservation of the Old Stone Barracks in Plattburgh. The announcement will take place at Clinton Community College's Stafford Theater at 5 p.m. Constructed in 1838, the Old Stone Barracks is the oldest building at the former Plattburgh Air Force Base and was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1971. Following the sale of the barracks to a Canadian developer in 2011, concerned citizens united to explore available options to save the Old Stone Barracks. Stephen Engelhardt, Executive Director of the Adirondack Architectural Heritage, recognizes the importance of the event. He said, after 3.5 years of efforts by dozens of people to secure a better future for this remarkable historic building, there's finally some good news to share. News that offers a wonderful opportunity for the community and the region. The Friends of the Old Stone Barracks is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation dedicated to securing the highest and best use of Plattburgh's Old Stone Barracks. There is more information circulating. The Plattsburgh Press Republican newspaper ran a complete story on this event, well, fairly complete story on this event in today's edition, to the surprise of many people who've been kind of sitting on this secret for a long, long time. There are a few aspects that are not known to the general public yet, and that's the main reason for this news conference at Clinton Community College tonight at 5 o'clock. You know that Hometown Cable, Calvin Castine, me, Gordy Little, and everything that we do is dedicated toward preserving and enhancing the history of this North Country. Primary toward that interest is talk about the former Plattburgh Air Force Base, its present, its past, its present, and its future. So we hope you stay tuned for the rest of this program. I think you'll find it interesting and informative, and maybe there will be ways for you to offer your personal support to save the Old Stone Barracks. Stay tuned. And through the magic of hometown camera television, we're inside the Stafford Theater with Jerry Bates, my good friend. How are you, Jerry?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Town historian is just a tiny bit of the hats that he wears.
Well, it's varied, yes, but it all connects.
But the Friends of the Barracks is prime today, isn't it?
That's the top story of the day.
You know, there's excitement brewing here on the bluff today.
Well, we're exciting. We're terribly excited about this. We want to share it with the community. We think we've got a good story to tell, and we think and we hope that the community will join us in pursuit of that goal.
I did a little introductory bit or snippet, as they say on television, at the Old Stone Barracks before we came over here tonight.
All right.
A place where I've stood literally hundreds of times since I arrived here, actually in the early 1950s, to help pour cement to build the Plattburgh Air Force Base. And between then and now, lots has transpired.
It certainly has.
First of all, the base isn't here anymore. The Old Stone Barracks is, but I don't know how much longer it would be together. I've watched it moldering through the years, and it's made me very unhappy, Jerry, and you too.
Yes, that was a very deep concern that we all had, particularly when it was announced that the base was to be sold, or not the base, but the barracks was to be sold. And there were no plans for its maintenance or its upkeep or development or anything. And we recognized if we wanted that stone barracks to exist, we were going to have to be responsible for it. So a group of us gathered together and said, how are we going to go about doing this? And it evolved into the Friends of the Old Stone Barracks and this presentation tonight, in which we hope the community will join us.
You know, for those of you who are naysayers, and there are a few out there, not us by a long stretch, but those of you who thought there was no hope when the beautiful Old Stone Barracks was sold in 2011, I think, and gave up. Thank God people like Jerry and his group did not.
Well, we didn't. We knew that it would be a tough job and it would take a lot of work. And we weren't sure, of course, that we could do it, but we felt we had to try.
So we got some VIPs here tonight. We've got a nice little program planned.
Well, we tried to contact the people we thought would be interested in sharing our story, and Bill Owens is coming in, and Janet Dupre, and we've got some other speakers that I think will be very informative and interesting to listen to.
You've always loved history, Jerry. You and I have known each other for a long time, and you feel it in every corpuscle, don't you? As I do and Calvin does.
It's hard to escape once you go down that line. Every door is another one that's opening up before you even turn around.
We saw you only briefly a few days ago as we're recording this on Tuesday, August 5th, 2014, as we were interviewing our dear friend Art Lefebvre.
Yes.
Who was supervisor of that town that you're connected with for a very long time, and we wanted to get that historical perspective from Arthur. And I have to tell you, the response to that program on YouTube has been overwhelming. And
That's
not just
wonderful.
Art's family members, and he has many. But it's great to get that perspective. And
Yes,
you
it
were
is.
you were very kind to put together those scrapbooks for Art too. He did his homework. He said, "Gordy, I got to take a memory pill before we get there." But you know what?
He pulled it out.
Once he opened his mouth, it began to flow. And
Yeah.
we got a look piece of history. That's quite a town. The growth in that town, just since I've been here since 1961 on the radio, is tremendous.
Yeah, a lot has happened. And even with the fall of the base, a lot has happened to regroup the town and make it stronger and better than ever.
You know, I find myself promoting the reuse of the base almost as much as I promoted the base itself through its missions
Yeah,
since it came here in the early 1950s, and that's a good thing.
it is.
It's great. The reuse is a story that it's hard to match almost anywhere in the U.S. of A. So,
Well, you get around more than I do, so I'm going to take your word for
oh, I'm pretty old, but it reminds me of the old song, "Don't Get Around Much Anymore." Jerry, thanks so much for inviting us here tonight. We can't wait to hear everything that's said
it.
tonight.
You're most welcome. Always glad to see you guys here.
Jerry Bates, thanks again.
Good evening. I'm Alice Church.
And I'm Marty Mannix.
We are both officers of Friends of the Old Stone Barracks, your host for this evening. First, we wish to thank Clinton Community College for making this wonderful facility available to us. They have been most accommodating. Might we ask that we could all give and join in giving them a round of applause. We also wish to introduce you to the members of the directors of Friends of the Stone Barracks, Old Stone Barracks. So we ask that the board members please stand and be recognized. Board members, Jerry? Thank you. We also want to take this time to tell you that Friends of the Stone Barracks is now a federally recognized 501c3.
When a Montreal developer purchased the Old Stone Barracks property in 2010 and proposed a massive apartment complex on the 7-acre site, the community rose in shock and anger. To his credit, Bernard Schneider withdrew his proposal, but by putting the property back on the market, the threat remained that it could be inappropriately developed and the building lost. Out of this crisis,
Out of this crisis, I go on, you go on. Out of this crisis, a group of people quietly came together to create the Friends of the Old Stone Barracks. And we are here tonight to announce the existence of the Friends and to tell you about its purpose, progress, and ambitions. We are also here to announce that the Friends, after 2.5 years of prolonged negotiations by a committee of our board, we have signed a contract to purchase the Old Stone Barracks. Some of you may have read that in today's paper. It's a thrill for us. I mean, we feel like we really accomplished that.
so tonight we raise our hands together and proclaim the barracks are once again ours. They are back in Clinton County where they belong. And we believe tonight is the time to celebrate as we have reclaimed the crown jewel of our military history. To accomplish our goals, we tonight launch a capital campaign to raise $225,000 over the next 5 months to finalize the purchase and to move into the preservation and stabilization phases.
As our presentations unfolds, you will hear of the significance of the Preservation League of New York State, having recognized the Old Stone Barracks as one of the 7 to Save projects to be highlighted by them this year. A great recognition of the importance of the site and the importance of our community's efforts to save it.
And with that, we're done, and we get the pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Congressman William Owens.
Thanks, Alice and Marty. I think it's an exceptional privilege to be able to stand here and to see the preservation of the barracks, which I and a number of the other speakers had the pleasure to be here for their opening. They really had to think about that. Preservation of important historic properties are very important. From my perspective, I was stationed here for 2 years and did about 3 years of reserve duty, and almost on every occasion I passed the barracks at some point during the day. These are very important elements, given that they were erected in the 1830s, served through the Civil War, and really through much of our military history through World War I. Many of you know the Plattburgh Barracks was in fact an operating officers candidate school program during the Second World War, I believe for the Navy. So this has been a long history. And when you see folks get behind the preservation of something which represents our military history, it represents, for many of us, the history of our experiences here in Plattsburgh. I recognize and welcome the effort, and I certainly urge you to support, to the maximum extent you can, the fundraising and capital campaign to ensure that the barracks are purchased and to ensure that we have the ability to develop it in an appropriate way. Thank you very much, and good luck to the Friends. I now have the fun opportunity to introduce Celine Paquette. Celine is well known in the community, a longtime educator, a politician for many years, a person who has done much for her community, and I think it is very fitting that she's here. I also understand that she has renovated another stone building, and that's the expertise that she brings to this operation. And I will also say she was not present with me when they were opened.
Thank you, Bill. A dear friend to me and to this community, my architect, John McKenna, passed away unexpectedly in November. John was so enamored with the Old Stone Barracks and worked with this group, the Friends of the Old Stone Barracks, to help to get us all to this moment today. I know he is watching this evening, and he's watching us with delight. Thank you, John. And so I am doubly honored to be here for this amazing announcement and to add my support to this important project. Buildings tell stories and reflect who we are as people. The really good ones stay with us a long time because they continue to be useful and valuable to us. And so it is with the Old Stone Barracks. It has been many things to many people, and tonight I want to share a little of its history with you. The story begins in the decades following the War of 1812, and the American military worried about British Canada on our northern border. They believed a permanent army post should be near the border and Lake Champlain, which had been a strategically important military and commercial corridor. This permanent post was to replace the existing facilities for soldiers that consisted of crude, dilapidated log structures. In 1838, Brigadier General Abraham Eustis complained to Major General Alexander Macomb, a name we know, who was commanding general of the United States Army, about the situation. He said, "I take the liberty of calling your attention to the deficiency of quarters for the troops at this station. You are already informed that there is scarcely a vestige of the old barracks remaining." The end of quote. Besides the urgent need for better housing, General Eustis viewed Plattburgh as a future training ground for the nation's standing army, which had grown to 12,000 men. The original plan for the barracks complex was a quadrangle of 4 buildings, only 2 of which were ever built. Using stone quarried from nearby Bluff Point, construction began on the walls of both the officers' quarters and the listed men's barracks by August 1839, but it was not clear sailing. The onset of winter slowed construction, as did bureaucratic red tape, and guess what? Funding problems. Eventually, Captain R.E. Clary, the assistant quartermaster of the Army, was sent to Plattsburgh to oversee the construction project. Under his supervision, work progressed, and by October 1843, the new barracks was finally occupied. October 1843, 171 years ago. The exterior of the barracks, with its long 2-story double colonnaded porch, was done in the popular Greek Revival style that would dominate American architectural design through the middle of the 19th century. This classically inspired architecture resonated with the American public because, as a fledgling democracy, we identified with the democratic ideals of ancient Greece and sought a way to separate ourselves from England after independence in the War of 1812. The enlisted barracks originally contained 18 rooms. On the first floor, there was a hospital, dispensary, company office, sergeant's room, kitchen, and mess hall. Upstairs were large sleeping rooms that reflected the trend of housing soldiers in larger open rooms, because larger, cleaner spaces were believed to be more conducive to camaraderie and good health. The building was first heated with a series of fireplaces, but these were soon replaced by cast iron stoves, which used less wood and provided better heat. From 1849 to 1861, the Plattburgh Post, as it had become known, was significant as one of the few permanent military installations in the country. Now for a little bit of humor. The original bunks used by the men stationed here slept 2 men to a bed. and had been hastily constructed from random wood. As early as 1841, there was a general order for the two-person wooden beds at all permanent military installations to be replaced with single iron beds. But the general order was mandated and not funded. Sound familiar? It took 30 years until 1871 for all soldiers to have their own single bed. In May 1850, Major Thomas J. Jackson, better known to us as Stonewall Jackson, was at the Plattburgh Barracks for court-martial when he wrote to his sister that, quote, "I am now on the border of Canada. It is the purpose of trying some prisoners. In coming to this place, I have passed some charming scenery. On my way here, I saw the old Fort Ticonderoga and Crown Point, and in front of this garrison was fought the great naval action of the late war," end of quote, referring, of course, to McDonough's huge victory. Also, of particular interest to me as a farmer's daughter was that in 1855, when the post was largely vacated, the parade grounds were used by the Clinton County Agricultural Society for their fairgrounds. Can you imagine what a glorious treat for the locals to have lakeside views while showing their prized livestock? Then, like now, the people in North Country did not like to see the property abandoned. During the Civil War, hundreds of men from Clinton and Franklin counties heeded President Lincoln's call for volunteers, and once the troops were mobilized, the post operated mainly as a hospital. It won't surprise you that the presence of the Army post at Plattsburgh was widely supported by local citizens. When the General of the Army and the Secretary of War decided to abandon the post, the Plattsburgh Republican newspaper and hundreds of concerned citizens spoke out against its closure. Sound familiar, doesn't it? But this time, not only did the government reverse its position, but appropriated funds for a whole series of new buildings north of the barracks, including many of the buildings we know around the Oval. This buildup resulted in the Plattsburgh Post becoming one of the largest Army posts in the country. In 1898, the 21st U.S. Infantry, which had garrison at the Plattburgh Barracks, fought in Cuba and later participated in the Philippine insurrections. This regiment was referred to as the President's Home because President McKinley vacationed at Hotel Champlain on Bluff Point and would visit the post below to review the troops and attend musical performances by the unit's band, which was housed in the Old Stone Barracks. In 1915, the War Department authorized a program that became known as the Plattsburgh Idea. Prominent business and professional men from major urban centers of the Northeast registered for the program, and the Citizens Military Training Camp established the basis for the Reserve Officers Training Program, or as we now know it, ROTC. In 1939, on the eve of World War II, the post hosted the first United States Army maneuvers, a huge training operation involving tanks, aircraft, and 20,000 soldiers. In 1944, the Plattsburgh Barracks became a naval station and convalescent hospital for injured military. Following World War II, between 1946 and 1953, part of the Army post was home to Champlain College. Some of us remember that. To meet the educational needs of returning veterans. During this time, the barracks served as apartments for married faculty members. But enrollment did not sustain the campus. In 1952, President Truman authorized a $28 million appropriation for the creation of the Plattburgh Air Force Base. The Old Stone Barracks watched as the air base facility was built around it between 1954 and 1955 as a strategic air command base. And in 1959, the Old Stone Barracks was renovated to accommodate 9 families and was in use until about 1967. In the mid-60s, the former officers' quarters were demolished. And in 1971, the Old Stone Barracks was listed on the Register of Historic Places. The Old Stone Barracks has been a workhorse in this community. She has been patiently transitioned from housing Army, infantry, and artillery units, a naval hospital, headquarters for the band, seen troops muster and train for the Civil War, the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II. It became part of an innovative college and then part of the Air Base facility. Through all this time, it has served us, changed with us, and been part of our military history. Now, it is time to add to the history of this patient building. By accepting the challenging responsibility of bringing this building into the 21st century and continuing to tell its story, we will add a next chapter or two, and possibly another 171 years. Now it's up to us. Thank you. At this time, I am pleased to introduce Erin Tobin. Erin is here from Albany in her role as the Regional Director of Technical and Grant Programs for the Preservation League of New York State.
Hi everyone, it's such a pleasure to be here today, and it's a real honor to be here to represent the Preservation League of New York State part of this wonderful event celebrating the Friends of the Old Stone Barracks and the Old Stone Barracks themselves. And I'm here to announce that the Preservation League of New York State has put the Old Stone Barracks on its 2014-2015 Seven to Save list. That means it's one of seven properties, 7 sites across the state that the Preservation League will focus on for not only the next 2 years, but for as long as necessary to make sure that we can support the Friends of the Old Stone Barracks and the entire community as it rallies around the preservation and adaptive use of this wonderful building. The Preservation League of New York State was founded in 1974, and we invest in people and projects that champion the essential role of preservation in community revitalization, sustainable economic growth, and protection of our historic buildings and landscapes. And that's just what Friends of the Old Stone Barracks does, and what Plattburgh is doing in its celebration and recognition of the importance of the Old Stone Barracks. Our Seven to Save program since 1999 has worked with local communities in this way to support their efforts, to provide enhanced technical services from our staff in Albany, and to bolster the groups that need bolstering, and then to highlight the groups like the Friends of the Old Stone Barracks that have done this amazing job of bringing the community together, raising the money, celebrating its history, and calling attention to the importance of the military history of Plattburgh and the North Country. And whatever we can do to support that, we will, both as part of the Seven to Save listing and beyond. The Old Stone Barracks, going from an Army training base to a strategic air command, and now as it looks to its next chapter in its life, the Preservation League will look to provide some priority in terms of what funding we have available. We will support its fundraising efforts, and we're very, very happy to provide whatever enhanced visibility and raising awareness that we can do. This is a fabulous community effort, and I am so thrilled to be a part of it. And I think that the Friends of the Old Stone Barracks should be very, very, very proud of the work that it's done, and everybody here in the Plattburgh community. It's such a delight to be in a community that is so excited about its history, that has come so far so fast. Although it's been 4 years, and I'm sure a very long 4 years, in preservation advocacy efforts, that's a nanosecond, because these efforts take decades, and it's really wonderful to be a part of this as it moves forward to its next chapter. Thank you. I'm going to introduce Stephen Englehart, the Executive Director of the Adirondack Architectural Heritage and founding board member of Friends of the Old Stone Barracks. Stephen and Arch are colleagues of the Preservation League, and it's wonderful to be able to introduce them today. Thank you.
It's wonderful to be here and to be part of this announcement and this celebration. Look out into the room and see so many familiar and supportive faces. Many of you, Aaron just introduced me as the Executive Director of Adirondack Architectural Heritage, which I've been doing for 20 years. And in that capacity, it's been such an incredible pleasure to work with the Board of the Friends and others in the community to, over the last 3.5 years, to get to where we are today. And as a preservationist, as someone who cares very deeply about the communities of the Adirondacks and the Champlain Valley, this is a very exciting day. Some of you may also know that I grew up in Plattburgh and lived most of my life in the North Country. And so I have some personal perspectives on this issue and on this opportunity too that I want to talk a little bit about. Like most communities, Plattsburgh in the North Country has had some preservation failures, or to be more politically correct, some lost opportunities. The Turner Mansion, which is one of the grandest Victorian homes in the city at the top of Cornelia Street, was demolished in 1976 to build a fairly undistinguished apartment complex there. Before that, the Witherell Hotel on Margaret Street, where I heard Bobby Kennedy campaign on behalf of his brother. This was torn down shortly after it closed in 1967. And I keep trying to imagine what it would be like if the Witherell had held, if we had a historic downtown hotel in the city again. And sometimes buildings have to hang on through a kind of a cycle of neglect and deterioration for them to be kind of rediscovered again. And it would have been so wonderful that had happened there. And it might surprise you to learn that I consider the Orange Julep a drive-in restaurant with within a great glowing orange sphere to also be a most unusual and preservation-worthy building that has been lost too. And had it survived till today, like the Witherell, I think it would have benefited from a great interest in roadside architecture and all things authentically retro, from the 50s and 60s. So that's gone too. So I'm not really here to lament the loss of buildings that are gone, because I think after all change is a fact of life, and we have to work with what we've got, before us. The good news, the very, very good news, is that Plattsburgh and the North Country still have a lot of beautiful and important buildings, neighborhoods, and communities. Plattsburgh has an incredibly handsome downtown, and increasingly vibrant. The prospects for which keep getting better every year and are really enhanced by the near completion of the Strand Center for the Performing Arts Center. It has wonderful streets, too, that I know very intimately, as many of you do. Cornelia and Brinkerhoff and Catherine and Court Streets, and neighborhoods like the Point and the French Quarter. And lots of wonderful individual buildings. It's churches, Hawkins Hall, City Hall, and the McDonough Monument, the D&H Station, the Platt Houses, and the Kent Lord House, just to name a few. And around Plattsburgh, elsewhere in the North Country, communities like Keysville and Essex and Westport and Port Henry and Rouse's Point and Champlain and Chateauguay, all are communities with very special architectural and historic resources that are worthy of our attention and worthy of cherishing. So I'm reminding us of all of these treasures because I think they're part of what makes Plattsburgh in the North Country a great place to live and to work and to visit, and they present many economic and civic and cultural opportunities for us to be an even better place. If one was to study what are the key ingredients to successful communities all around the country, one of the things that you'd find is that whether they are small towns or large cities, these are communities that have embraced their heritage and preserved their architecture and made these things part of their identity and part of their future. So it seems that there are at least two opportunities before us. One is to save this extremely important historic building, and second, that in doing this, we become, like communities like Essex and Saranac Lake and Saratoga Springs, to name a few local examples, that we become a preservation community, and that would be a wonderful thing. So, we have a big opportunity before us, and a couple of big challenges. And as others have said before me, our first big challenge is to raise $225,000 to purchase the building and to undertake some basic stabilization work on the barracks. Well, so why buy the building? Maybe this is still in your mind. Well, as Marty and Alice remarked, we're buying the building really to take it off the open market and to ensure that whatever happens there is appropriate, considering the site's historic and architectural importance. No one is ever, if we're successful, and I believe we will be, no one is ever going to have to worry about opening up some future issue of the Press Republican and reading a story about the deterioration of the building, or the demolition of the building, or the development of its 7-acre site for apartments or some inappropriate commercial use. None of that will ever happen because of what we're doing here today. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to raise the money with your help by reaching out to the thousands of people near and far who recognize that the barracks is among the most historic buildings in the North Country, is among the most threatened buildings in the North Country, and is also a place with incredible promise. And we think the spectrum of believers is quite large, and that we'll get donations large and small from people in all walks of life, from school children, and I'm already imagining the little contributions with the crayon drawings of the Old Stone Barracks in the small, big handwritten script. Thank you so much for your work, and here's my $5 or something. That would be wonderful if we had dozens and dozens of those. And we're going to reach out to the thousands of people who passed through the air base, who we know, who we think have come to really treasure this place too. And we'll look to all of you, to civic organizations, to businesses, and others who are in a position to give at all different levels. But while that's going on, as Marty said, we have 5 months to raise $225,000. While that's going on, we want to start something else. And that is, we want to start bringing you all into this conversation about what the future is. Some of you may have arrived here today hoping to hear that we had the answer, that we knew what should and was going to happen there. And this just isn't true. So we're going to hold a couple of public forums. We're going to reach out through social media. We're going to try to bring as many of you into the conversation as possible so that within a relatively short amount of time, collectively, we're going to find out what the highest and best use is for this building and for this property. And we look forward to working with you with that. So in thinking about the possibilities for the Old Stone Barracks, I've come to realize what a beautifully central location this is, both literally and figuratively, for so much that we love and value about the North Country. You all know the marvelous, we've seen pictures of the marvelous 2-story porch that stretches across the front of the building. And I've sort of put myself on this porch and thought about what you can see by looking out there. And if one looks out to the left, to the west, you see in the distance the edge of the Adirondack Mountains, this great wilderness that is so much a part of our, wonderful part of our region, great attraction to visitors. And still to the west in the foreground, you see stretching before you the new base, and you can see or imagine all the new economic activity that's going on there, which is such a promising part of our future here. And looking to the right, to the east, you see Lake Champlain. And as all you, most of you know, here 2 very important military and naval engagements took place. First, when Benedict Arnold's fledgling colonial navy confronted the big British fleet as it came down the lake around Belcourt Island, and during the Revolutionary War, and later when MacDonough decisively defeated the British during the War of 1812. And then the lake became sort of a superhighway during the 19th century, linking northern New York and Vermont with Canada via the Richelieu Canal in the north and via the Champlain Canal to the Hudson River and points south. And then in the 20th century, it becomes a great recreational mecca. So wonderful, that's off in that direction. And then looking north in the foreground, I'm looking at the parade grounds there and imagining some of the things that Celine just talked about, you know, the mustering and gathering of the troops there, and the training of people, and all the thousands of people that came in and out of this facility to be part of our military effort. And then now you see this great constellation of museums that are around the barracks, the transportation museums, and the County Historical Association Museum, and the Battle of Plattburgh Museum. And then further in the distance, the Oval and the officers' quarters, and all of those wonderful National Register listed buildings. And then in the distance, again, some of this is real, some of this is imagined, but I see the spires of the city, I see bits of the hospital and the paper mill, and and the city is sort of humming away there in the distance. And all of this you can see from the porch. And further, looking a little even further afield, I'm looking up into the Champlain Valley, and I'm seeing our dairies and our apple orchards, and some of the new farming operations that are going on there. And just, it all makes me realize, right from the vantage point of this porch, what a wonderful, rich place we live in. So what's going to happen there in this very special place? Well, with your help, we're going to figure that out. And perhaps what emerges from our public discussions is for it to be maybe a new visitor center for the region, a place where people can get oriented to all the cultural and natural and hospitality offerings in the region. There certainly isn't a more authentic place for this to happen. Or perhaps what emerges is some new public, civic need for space, I don't know, courts or offices. Perhaps it could be the home of a cluster of non-profit organizations that share the facility and share some infrastructure there in the building, or maybe it's some combination of those three things. Or perhaps what emerges from the public discussion is an excellent private use for the building that still serves the community in some way. We can imagine all kinds of things, a craft brewery, a restaurant, an inn, something that still is welcoming to us as users, all located under one roof. But wherever we end up, by being part of this effort today and by going forward, you don't have to worry about whether or not this building in sight has a future, because we are committed here to its future. So one last observation I know that hasn't escaped many of you. This year we will celebrate the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Plattburgh. And through the work of the hundreds of people involved with the Battle of Plattburgh Commemoration Committee, these celebrations will be appropriately grand and substantive. But on this occasion, it seems so entirely fitting that this community dedicate itself to the preservation of its most significant historic military building. So I say, let's say yes to all that. Thanks. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our Assemblywoman, Janet Dupree.
Thank you, Steve. It's certainly a great honor to be here. And as somebody said earlier, we all have a script, but you know, I'm going to take the liberty of just digressing a little bit before I start. As I listened to Celine talk about her friend, my friend, I think the friend of so many of us, John McKenna, and his great vision and his dedication to this stone barracks, I couldn't help but sit here a couple of minutes ago and think about somebody else who's in the great architecture of the sky, high-fiving with John McKenna tonight. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't recall tonight somebody who had a vision for the entire history of this North Country, and our late, very dedicated, very honorable, and very missed county historian, Addie Shields, because she certainly will be absolutely So they're celebrating up there while we're celebrating down here. A small group of North Country people have dared to dream that this jewel, the Old Stone Barracks, could be recaptured for our community's legacy. And like many of you here tonight, I am so pleased to listen to what has transpired, to learn how I too can help our community through the next steps needed to ensure that this remarkable landmark remains on our landscape. We can do nothing less. I urge you to join forces and accept the challenge in front of us as we seek to hold on to what is so dear to us. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you Jerry Bates, the president of the board of the Friends of the Old Stone Barracks, and he can answer your questions.
Thank you. First of all, let me say that I am absolutely delighted to see all of you here tonight, to share in this story and to share in the dream that we have started to build, that we are just the beginning piece, and it's up to the community to really see us through. Before I get into some other remarks, I want to first acknowledge not only John McKenna, who was one of our early board members, but also two other board members who have, because of other reasons, left the board, but served very honorably and gave significantly to the progress of our organization and to this movement. And one of them was Anastasia Pratt, presently the Clinton County historian, and the other is John Kruger, who is the city historian. And I just want to pay them the respects that they deserve for their time. I also can't pass by the person that put this program together. Marianne Castine came in just a few weeks ago and offered to help. And frankly, had she not been here and done what she has done, we would not be here tonight in this fashion. We would be here, but probably not quite so sophisticated or as forward in our presentation as she has allowed us to do. Also, I want to acknowledge the Adirondack Architectural Heritage for lending a significant support for our efforts to save the Old Stone Barracks, for the personal efforts of Steve Engelhardt, who you've heard about. He's the executive director, and the communications and development director, Michelle Droz, who's down here. I also want to recognize some community leaders who have joined us tonight and hope that they will continue in their support of us as they have in the past. First of all, John Edling, if you would stand, if you're here, John. John Edling, the president of SUNY. We're very honored to have you here. James Dawson, the New York State Regent. Fred Smith, the interim president for Jim Kellman, mayor of the city of Plattburgh. Rochelle Armstrong, who is a counselor for the city of Plattburgh. Rochelle, are you here? Rochelle is the counselor for the district that the barracks is in, so we're very pleased that she's here. And also accompanying her is Joshua Preston. Preston? Joshua? Another counselor from the city. And I cannot, of course, pass by my boss and the wonderful man, Bernie Bassett, supervisor of the Gary Douglas, who's the executive director for the Chamber of Commerce, is here. And let's see, Paul Grasso is here, head of the Economic Development Program for and Kim Davis, the county treasurer, is here today. We're so pleased to have you here as part of this celebration. Now, you've seen and heard ample testimony as to the historic importance of the Old Stone Barracks property. its significance to the Champlain Valley community, and its potential to greatly enhance and benefit our communities altogether. We have disclosed some of the long and tough negotiations to arrive at a fair market price for the property and to preserve its open space and the view shed to Lake Champlain. We are thankful for the generosity of a handful of people and businesses who made leadership gifts that made it possible for us to secure the down payment, which then secured our local rights to regain a property that our community not only nearly lost, but might have ultimately seen destroyed from neglect over time. But all of that was a lot to digest in a short period of time, I know. And although we have done our very best to fully inform you of this development since we reached this purchase agreement with our down payment just a week ago, I have no doubt that you still may have some questions. So we'll open the floor to questions that you can address to any of our panelists or any member of the board. And I'm going to repeat the question so you can understand the answer in context with the question. Do we have any questions from the floor? We told the story that brilliantly. Yes, sir.
You've made the down payment and you have time frame to raise the rest. What happens if you don't raise the money with the down payment?
The question was if we make the down payment, the time frame to complete the rest of the payment, which is in December, and that is part of the contractual obligation that we have. We will make every effort, of course, to make that goal. We are pursuing grants and other avenues of fundraising. As a board, having some experience in different bodies, we believe that this is a doable target. We believe that we are going to get this job done. We'll be asking for your support in doing it, but we know as a community we can pull it together. There's plenty of support. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
We talked about the exterior of the building. Do you have any idea of the dimensions of the inside and maybe what some of the proposed historical or other type of B&B type, you went into that too, spaces might exist? I look at this building every day, but I have no clues as to space and what might be done.
It's a big space to begin with. It was gutted by the military when they left. They stripped it of all of the water, electric, all the utilities are gone. It's essentially bare bones. There is some wood framework. The stairs are intact. The interior stairs are all intact. The stone structure itself is sound. There is some damage to one end of the building at the foundation, which we are going to address. I don't have the square footage of that building. I know it's immense. We believe that there are all kinds of ways to carve out spaces if that is the best answer to its use of the space. And that's why we're going to have these community forums, so that we can talk about this together with all of you, to come up with ideas. We'll have the architectural plan so you can see exactly what space is there. And we can talk together about how that might be employed for the best use. Does that answer your question?
That's a start.
Okay? Yes?
Will there be an opportunity soon to go inside and have, people around and get a better, I think, when you see it.
Yeah, our contract right now allows us to go in with an engineer. We've got 30 days to define any problem with the building that we think might affect the price, or we can go back and say, look, because of what we found here, we don't want to pay that much, and we think you should pay attention to this. Once that 30 days is done, and we still have to negotiate the right to pass through it, and we also have the liability issues of taking people through that building. So we have to get some insurances and other things of that sort set up. So it'll be a while, but we will get it there and we'll be able to tour it and show it off to folks. Yes?
Gary, do you have any kind of media campaign, or are you going to be doing some, lawn concerts out there? I mean, I guess you have an accessibility issue, but, what's going to be the effort to go ahead and really generate the idea of being able to get people to have a little more close contact with this would be really helpful.
I'm very glad you asked that question, because we
I'm not a
help.
shill either.
We're going to be looking for a lot of help in our efforts to raise the funds. So we're looking for people who are ready to volunteer with us, to serve on the board. We have clipboards out in the hallway there that you can suggest that you'd be willing to talk to us about it, or you can come and talk to me or any of the board members and share your ideas about what you might be able to contribute or do. And we'd love to have all your help in thinking through those things. I'll tell you, since our efforts have all been working on trying to get a hold of the building and all the problems that involve with that, we are just now coming to grips, now that we suddenly realized that he was going to allow the sale of the building, which just happened on July the 11th, I think was the date that we found out. He finally said, okay, I'll sell it to you. That we have been dealing with, okay, now we got to bring this to the community, and we just haven't had time to put together a coherent campaign yet. So that's coming. So anybody who has expertise in that area is very welcome to join us. Yes?
Instead of having people go to the site, can you get a videographer to go in there when you're allowed to go in there, so then we can...
I'm sorry, I'm a little hard of hearing.
Okay, instead of having everyone go to the site, can you get a videographer to go in?
Yes.
And then we could put that, or someone could put that on a website, the Friends website, and that way we could see it and it would lessen liability issues and those sorts of things.
Excellent idea. Excellent idea. Thank you for that. Yes?
Because of its historic classification, are there any limitations for future uses?
I don't think we're ready to define that yet. I think we need to wrestle with some of those things. The main thing we're interested in is making sure that whatever plan evolves, that there will be a long-term agreement that that building will be preserved, that the facade will essentially not change.
Well, there were talks of like a bed and breakfast, or are all of those uses that could actually come to fruition?
I don't think there are any uses that are out of bounds.
So the interior structure doesn't have to be brought back to what it once was?
No, the interior can be remodeled in whatever way is suitable. The preservation effort is generally to keep the outer structure intact. Question over here. Yes.
When you approach offsprings or relatives of people who have been stationed here to donate in memory of?
Yes, that's part of the thinking that we would have.
Okay.
We will pursue that vigorously. Any questions over here? Yes, in the back.
Yes, Jerry, assuming you reach your goal to acquire the structure and land by January 1st, do you have plans to create, or have you already an operational budget in place and know where the funding source is going to be for that?
My hearing is getting in the way again.
Yes. Do you have a plan, assuming you acquire it in December, coming January 1st, do you have an operational budget plan and how that's going to be funded in place yet?
What we are doing right now is raising funds. The 225 includes the cost of the building and includes the cost, as we see it, of some basic repair work, the foundation, securing the foundation of the building, and some operating funds to carry us through. We also have applications in that will allow us to borrow money to bridge us while we raise other money if we really get into trouble. The long-range effort will be to provide a use of that building which will provide an income stream. So there will be some commercial aspects either through leasing of space or rental of space or a commercial operation which can generate that kind of income. We don't want this to be a drag on the community that goes on and on and on. So we're aiming for that, and we believe that that is entirely possible. Okay?
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes?
How much property was with it too?
There are 7 3/4 acres of land that encompass the whole property. It's a good surprise. It's a good amount of land in the property. If there are no questions, I think we can begin to close up here. And I want to remind you to make sure to leave us a contact number so we can keep you informed of the progress that we make. If you have an email or whatever, there are some clipboards out in the lobby there. And just make sure we have that information if you would. Stop by our table to the right as you exit and make a donation if you will. On the way out, you can take a donation form on the way out. Our people at the door will be able to give you some of those. And make a donation online. You can do that at oldstonebarracks.org. Tell your friends, use social media to spread the word, and participate in our upcoming public forum to advocate the highest and best use of the property. That date will be announced. It's not yet arranged, but it will be highly publicized. Thank you all for having time to come here tonight and sharing your thoughts with us. And again, have a great evening.
So am I.
There is at least one person in this building who can cover any subject from horse nails to Bolsheviki.
And that's you.
Steve Engelhardt. What a speech tonight. You outdid yourself. You ought to frame that and put it in your office down there.
Well, it's easy to be articulate if you're inspired and you're happy and there's a lot of good things to say, and that's what today was all about.
You know, there's a lot to be inspired about.
Yeah.
I told you walking over here in front of the camera that Calvin and I started our program tonight by standing in front of the Old Stone Barracks, where I have stood so many times. Calvin said, "Do you know the way to get in there?" I said, "I go in there all the time. When somebody comes to town who hasn't been here in a long time, I say, get in the car. We're going to see the Old Stone Barracks."
I'm going to show you some special places.
Because that's where it begins for me.
Yeah.
And it is a special place. We've done, I don't know how many television programs about that place since the beginning. And my connection with the Stone Barracks goes back to the early 1950s when I came to pour cement to start the build construction projects on the Plattburgh Air Force Base, and I was attracted like a magnet to that building. When did your lifelong love affair with the Old Stone Barracks begin, Steve?
Well, of course, until the base closed, it was a bit off limits. But I had a good friend whose father in high school, was, I think he was the base commander. His name was Dan Gunn.
Oh my goodness!
And we used to go to visit the Gunns at their quarters on the Oval. And with my friend Steve and Dana Gunn, we would go, explore the base. And I think I would have seen it from a distance from Route 9, but it was really through the Gunn family that I got onto the base and got to see it.
Never realizing that in 2014, on the 5th day of August, you'd be on a stage pontificating about the necessity of saving that building. What a thrill.
Yeah, it is.
What a thrill for me and for you. Somebody asked the question, what happens if you don't raise the money? No, we're very positive about that, aren't we?
We are very positive about that. It's there's a lot of just the other day we were asking ourselves the question: how are we going to reach out to all of the thousands of military personnel that came through the air base? And someone directed us to a Facebook page of former Plattburgh Air Force military personnel that has 10,000 members.
Of course.
And so hopefully that will be a vehicle for reaching them, because
Talk about the social media.
Yeah.
That's a way to make
Yeah.
it social, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we've just recently opened the Plattburgh Air Force Base Museum, adding a fourth dimension to our little.
And I neglected to mention that. Shame on me, but yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
We're trying to get people to come out of the woodwork, having done a show there. But we all of us have personal connections with Plattburgh Air Force Base.
Yeah.
So we hope that museum expands as the interest in saving the old barracks expands.
Yeah.
We've heard this. I was going to call it a song and dance, but it's more than that now. We did a long interview with Keith Herculow, the president of the Battle of Plattburgh Association. I don't know how many years ago now. Is it before it was sold? We did the television show with Keith Herculow. But it was anyway. It's probably 3 or 4 years ago now. And he had a dream, and we all had dreams. But it took somebody like you and this august
great
group
board,
up there
this
tonight.
great group of people. Yeah.
How could you amass a better group for this? That board is fantastic.
But the cool thing is, we didn't have to go out and look for each other. We just found each other because we were all sort of riled up at the same time, and we all kind of looked at each other and said, if it isn't us that starts the ball rolling here, who's it going to be? So we just picked ourselves, really.
Is it really only a couple of months since this guy decided to sell the barracks?
Yeah, I think we got a sort of verbal okay with the contract in June, but I don't think it was till the middle of July until we actually, signed an agreement.
So this big rock is at the top of the hill, ready to start its descent. And we're going to get the ball rolling. I think you got a good start on it tonight.
Yeah.
And if you can get the word out through Hometown Cable, through all the other media that were here tonight, it sounds to me, I've seen this community come together for things that I would deem of lesser importance than saving the Old Stone Barracks. And I've seen a lot of capital campaigns that I never dreamed would go over the top happen.
Yep.
So I think.
Well, and I think, I think this will certainly say something very positive about the community if we are able to rise to the occasion here, that we are a community that cares about its history, that cares about its architecture, that sees the possibilities in a place like this. So it's very good. So I would be remiss if I didn't say that people can get more information about the project. They can donate, give us their contact information at www.oldstonebarracks.org.
That's very easy to see.
And thank you for spreading the word.
Well, there's no question that it is an iconic structure. It is a landmark. I have this warm feeling down inside every time I drive north or south on Route 9, especially at night, especially around Halloween, because it's just a wonderful spot. We did, for the Battle of Plattburgh Association, I did Haunted Haunts bus tours for a couple of years. We always stopped there, and a dear friend of mine dressed up as Teddy Roosevelt. And I used the word pontificated. That's what he was doing on the steps up there.
Yeah.
And everybody from out of town and the people who live here stop at that place and say, wow, look at this.
Yeah.
And so it has grieved me right up until tonight when Calvin and I started our program over there. It grieves me to see things moldering, see the problems at the base of one end, to see those great porticos, those porches.
Well, that's all going to change, Gordy.
Starting now.
Starting now, absolutely.
Steve, I want to thank you so much personally. I want to thank your hand for all you've done to preserve the great architecture and the history of the North Country.
My great pleasure.
This is chapter 1.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We'll read that book right to the end.
Let's talk.
Thanks again,
Let's talk in a
Steve.
few months. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, okay.
Fred Smith, how are you, my friend?
Great. It's great to be here.
We were at the Minor Museum in Chazy when Fred was up there one time, and we were chatting, and we both said, "Wait a minute."
Yes.
Wait a minute.
Yes.
We know each other.
Yes.
From when we were little kids and went to a Methodist church camp called Aldersgate.
Yes, Branningham, New York.
Branningham Lake near Belleville.
Yep.
Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm.
And here we are all these years later.
Yes.
I don't know if we're better or worse people, but here we are anyway.
Trying to think of it as better, Gordy.
Fred, you've been doing so many things. I can't keep track of you. But here you are on the bluff as interim president of Clinton Community College.
Keeps me young.
And I just asked you before we came out here how long that will last, and you said 2 years?
2 years, that's the plan, 2 years.
And then you're going to find some palm trees and lay under them for the rest of your life.
No, I joke, that if I should die in office, a typical higher ed, they'll form a committee to decide whether they should lower the flag or not.
Oh.
And 2 weeks later, they still wouldn't have concluded. And somebody will say, my God, they buried him 10 days ago. Why are we still talking about this?
You know what? You're a North Country boy, whether you like it or not.
That's right.
And it's only fitting that maybe you finish your career up here on this beautiful spot.
It would be fine with me.
I've said it to Calvin, I've said it to the world a million times. If I had to pick my favorite spot on the face of the earth, it would be right over there overlooking the scene of the Battle of Valcourt,
Yes.
and the scene
Yes.
of the Battle of Plattburgh, and so much history here.
And imagine being a resident of the hotel.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. North Country boy.
Well, we could have met Babe Ruth if we'd been back here.
That's
Yeah,
right.
he
Yes.
was here.
Yeah.
So anyway, this was a big deal that we've just witnessed inside.
Wonderful.
And
You know.
how fitting is it to welcome the friends of the Old Stone Barracks to the Ronald B. Stafford Center for Arts, Science, and Technology on the Bluff at Clinton Community College to make that big announcement tonight.
In the backyard of the historic hotel.
It's wonderful.
It's great. It's pretty exciting.
We wanted to take just a moment to thank you for allowing that to happen here tonight. It's we've seen quite a few interesting and wonderful things happen inside this building.
And you'll see more.
And many things on this campus before that.
It's we're more than pleased to be able to do something like this. And I, in my own interest in historic preservation, this is just perfect for us.
We interviewed Steve Englehart because we've interviewed him many times before, talking on myriad subjects concerning the history of the North Country. And if you want to talk about somebody who loves old buildings, you can just see the adrenaline rush, right, as his cheeks redden as he talks about these things. So this is a big deal for Steve and for everybody else on that stage. And now, if by virtue of this program and the other media who are here, if we can perpetuate this passion, this interest in history, who knows what that barracks is going to be like in 5 or 10 or 15 years, huh?
I mean, it's just, it's a hallmark of this area's interest in historic preservation. It's wonderful. And you see it in so many places and in so many different ways. It's very pleasing.
Well, it's pleasing for us to be here, Fred. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No. We're glad you're here.
To thank you for your friendship all these years and for all you've done to promote this great North
Thank
Country
you.
that
Thank
we know
you.
and love so much.
It's a great place. Thanks, Gordy.
We'll try to find you again when you're retired, if I'm still upright.
Yes, if both of us are still upright.
Thanks again, Fred.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Great to see you, Gordy. And Calvin, of course.
Of course. If you haven't had an opportunity to visit Clinton Community College on this beautiful bluff on Lake Champlain, or if you haven't done it for many, many years, we urge you to come up here as I do with guests who come to my house and friends and relatives. It is a beautiful spot, one of the most beautiful spots in the North Country, and it's only fitting that this should be the place where the announcement was made for preservation of the Old Stone Barracks on the former Plattburgh Air Force Base. Our personal thanks to all those people on that committee, lots of people who were not named tonight who are supporting in the background, and for those of you who will heed the call and put your dollar in the collection plate, as my father used to say in the old churches long ago. Make out the generous checks. I want to thank all those people involved, and thanks all those people whose names we don't even know yet, because this project to save the Old Stone Barracks is just beginning. Can't wait to see what the next chapter will be. Thank you also for your comments and suggestions about this program. It's a pleasure for Calvin and I to have been doing this these many years, and we hope far into the future. But that will depend a great deal, of course, on how generous you are with your contribution to this cause. So if you have a checkbook handy, rip out a check and put whatever amount you think is appropriate, from $1 to, well, we won't set an upper limit at this time. Send your check to Hometown Cable in care of Calvin Castine, 1477 Ridge Road in Champlain. And who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.